Welcome to Bebus channel's English section. My name is Imtiaz Patel, Varediawala, and I am one of the hosts of this English section program called In Conversation With. As you know that Bebus is brought to you by the Community Media Centre, Bolton, UK. And as the name suggests, it's the channel for communication, it's the channel for conversation, and also it's the channel which provides interaction with the community members, and this is the medium where we can come closer to each other in terms of discussing various issues which affects us as the community. Bebus belongs to all of us. It is our voice, it is our communication, and it is our conversation with each other, and especially this program is targeted towards issues which are sometimes sensitive, issues sometimes very tough to discuss, and through this medium we have every opportunity to invite distinguished guests who would come with their specialist area and would provide us an opportunity to interact with them. We are very fortunate today to have a distinguished person, Janab Suleman Nagdi. He occupies various positions and has contributed a lot to community welfare. He is the Public Relations Officer and spokesperson of the Federation of Muslim Organizations in Leicestershire, or I think here they say Leicestershire. His area of interest are public issues, human rights and interfaith relations. Her Majesty's Government, UK, has recognized his contribution by awarding MBE, which is Member of British Empire, in 2002. In 2008, he was appointed as Her Majesty's Deputy Lieutenant. So on behalf of Bebus team, on behalf of our listeners, and also on behalf of our viewers, we would like to extend a very warm welcome to Suleman Nagdi. Welcome to this program, sir, In Conversation With.
Thank you, Brother Imtiaz, and Assalamu alaikum to all our listeners.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First of all, it would be nice, Suleman Sahib, if you could share something about your background, tell us about your birthplace, if you could share something about your childhood and education, please.
Sure, thank you. I was born in southern Central Africa in a small country called Malawi. I lived in Zambia. My formal education, both primary and secondary, was what was former Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe, and I lived a short while in South Africa. My heritage, of course, is Indian. My parents come from the subcontinent of India, and I was fortunate to visit India some 7-8 years ago, and have visited India every year since then because it's a country that's become very close to my heart. So yes, Indian heritage, birth in truly, I would say, Africa, and most of my life spent in the United Kingdom. This is possibly my 40th year residing in the city of Leicester.
So most of your initial education and everything has been, I'm assuming, here in Leicester or somewhere else?
No, it has been Zimbabwe, because I left Zimbabwe when I was 19 years old.
Okay.
And I came across here in 76, and as a result of the formal education that I received in Zimbabwe, which was of course formerly Rhodesia, which was a British mandated territory, and therefore I was more immersed in the British educational system, and of course our papers came all the way to Cambridge to be marked and came back, and this is part and parcel of the what we call the British Empire that existed at that time, and so I'm a byproduct of that empire.
Oh, I see. Right. So I think most of your childhood you spent in Africa.
In Africa, that's right.
Do you still have, does any memory haunts you about your childhood, any events or any impressions, influences of that continent?
Yes, of course it does. I went to a school certainly in Zimbabwe, and as you know, Zimbabwe was formerly Rhodesia, and also South Africa has an apartheid system, and I was educated within the apartheid system. Therefore, Asians went to Asian schools, the black indigenous population went to their own schools, and whites went to their own schools. So again, I'm a byproduct of the apartheid system. Nevertheless, people that talk about segregation in school and education, example, we hear a lot about faith schools, and say maybe faith schools are not or could be counterproductive in society. I sort of disagree with that, because I'm a byproduct of total segregation as an individual, but I have still immersed myself in the wider society in the United Kingdom, in Europe, and even further afield. So I think it depends on individuals and not necessarily the humble beginnings.
Oh, I see. That's great. Suleman Sahib, you are the Public Relation Officer for the Federation of Muslim Organizations, what is known as FMO, Leicestershire. Can you tell us a little bit more about the aims and objectives of these particular organizations and why there was a need for Federation of Muslim Organizations?
The Federation of Muslim Organizations has been in existence for 30 years now, and I think the most part of the 30 years I have been in one form or another a member of the Federation, possibly at the present moment the longest serving member, and sometimes people call me as being part of the furniture of the Federation. The Federation is a federal body. It's totally different to other bodies up and down the country. So example, in the north we have the Bradford Council of Mosques or the Lancashire Council of Mosques, but the Federation is unique in that it encompasses mosques and other Muslim organizations like charities, human rights, and sporting events, etc., all part and parcel of the Federation. Now the Federation itself is governed by a constitution. It has elected members, and therefore we are elected to represent the community in various fields. We have subcommittees that deal with health and social welfare, that deal with education, that deal with a wide variety of things. I have two particular roles within the Federation. Being the Public Relations Officer, I work closely with members of other faith communities of none, and I also work closely with other statutory authorities like the police, the local authority, etc., including government at national level and at the European level. The idea of the Federation is to foster good relations with people of other communities, but at the same time articulate the needs of the Muslim community in various fields. As an example, we have been involved in relation to dietary needs of Muslims in hospitals, in prisons, etc. The establishing of multi-faith chaplains, the multi-faith prayer rooms. These are some of the social welfare projects that we've been involved in. But more importantly, in a world where we live in now, where the world's spotlight, the media spotlight is on the Muslim community 24/7, usually of a negative nature, the need for Muslims to promote themselves and to explain and realign the thinking in the mass media is absolutely crucial. So I write as a columnist for the local newspaper, but I also do interviews for national TV, radio, issues as simple as Thought for the Day, and I also write sometimes articles for the national broadsheets as well. I travel quite extensively in Europe. In recent years, I've done a lot of work in Norway and Sweden to help the Muslim community that recently arrived there in relation to their particular needs. So the Federation, though it's local, its work has truly gone national and in certain cases at a European level. So the Federation is there as a federal body which does not actually exist in many parts of the country at a local level. We have federal bodies that exist in London that represent the Muslims hopefully throughout the country, but at a local level it's quite unique in that sense.
Suleman sir, I believe that you have written this book called Discovering Through Death, Belief and Practices. Can you share your views and a little bit more information about your recent publication, which is Beliefs and Practices?
Sure. The book is actually published through a charity called the Muslim Burial Council of Leicestershire. It was established 20 years ago. If you know, the Muslim community require burial within 24 hours or soon thereafter. Such provisions do not exist within the United Kingdom. We signed the first historic document with the local authority, and as a result of that, formed the organization that looks at the needs of the Muslim community, working with the coroners, the police, the hospitals, etc., and the release of bodies. But we also do consultation documents for the Home Office on issues of organ donation, organ retention, shortage of burial land, etc. And we are in the process of creating a national body, which we have had people from Bolton, people up and down the country, including Scotland and Wales, who have come to Leicester. We've had 2 meetings, and we are trying to create a national body that will look at this issue. We are also working with the Leicester Royal Infirmary and the Department of Health and Ministry of Justice, looking at what we call virtual autopsy, which is MRI and CT scanning, a scanning process that will determine cause of death through a scanning process as opposed to a traditional autopsy. And that work has carried on further in Europe. I have spoken about it as far away as Georgetown in Washington, in Toronto, in Canada, in South Africa. So it truly has a global perspective. And again, a humble organization, that's a charity that operated. Now the book itself covers world's 8 faith and no faith. It starts with the issue of consecrated ground, the Human Rights Act, and then it changes to the issues of the different faith communities and what they see. And people of no faith has now been used as a toolkit for medical profession practitioners like doctors, nursing stations, etc., and also police liaison officers who are involved in issues around homicide, suicide, unexpected and suspicious death. So truly, again, here's a contribution from the Muslim community to the wider community, being a Muslim organization, but still working with all faiths and people of no faith on a level that is far higher in relation to looking after people at a time when they have lost a loved one.
So if somebody wants to acquire this book, which is Discovering Through Death, Beliefs and Practices by Suleman Nagdi MPE, how do they actually get hold of this copy?
They can visit our website, which is www.mbcall.org.uk, and they can send us an email. There is no cost for the book because we're a charity, and we'll be more than pleased to post a copy out to them. And we hope that it will be useful in an educational establishment especially, and we hope that the promotion of that work not only looks at issues of death and bereavement, but shows that our contribution to the society where we are living in is beyond words into action, and this is one such action.
Okay, thank you very much for that. And when I was studying your biodata, which is of course, you are working at a various level in different capacities. You have been working on the local, national and international issues related to the Muslim communities particularly, as you have just briefly said to me. Now, what are the most serious issues facing the Muslim communities today?
I think the serious issue that affects the Muslim community today is the perceptions of Muslims, often seen very negatively. And of course, we also have difficulty in relation to issues of radicalization and issues of terrorism. So I have worked with the Home Office. As an example, the previous Labour government, I contributed 2 written submissions to the Prevent strategy, a new one to the coalition government, have given evidence to the House of Commons cross-party on the whole issue of the Prevent strategy, which there are parts of it which are difficult for the Muslim community to actually take in, and other part of it, the part that regards safeguarding of children, is of course something that we welcome. There's also issues around stop and search, not stop and search in the city, but stop and search at airports and ports of entry. So I have worked with Lord Carlisle's office and have contributed to the Schedule 7 examining officers who use the particular powers at airports, and we have managed to influence some of that. But there's various other issues that we have done mostly at the consultation level for central government, and the need for this is crucial, because if we are part of this country, we are part of Britain, and this is the future in a country where our children and hopefully grandchildren and their children following on will live, we have to take our rightful place as British citizens in this country, contribute positively. One of the other challenges that I see, which I think is a sign of weakness in the Muslim community, for those that feel that we are now in a siege situation, or we feel that the whole world is against them, and I feel that that is counterproductive. As a Muslim community, we have contributed positively to both the political and the social life of this country, and I think that we should articulate those as well. And I'm sure there's much good that's been done, as opposed to a handful of people that have carried out acts of criminality in the name of our faith, which is the absolute minority. And I say to people, do not hold the whole society, whole of community responsible as a direct result of a handful of people that may have hijacked or have taken the faith of Islam, which is a faith that talks of peace, of compassion, of love, down the path of something that is more violent and something that's alien to us.
I take your point, but if you look at the world scenario, if you look at the South Asia, particularly India, maybe perhaps other nations as well, in Europe, particularly in the UK, why Muslim communities? Why Muslim communities on target, as you suggested, that 24/7? What are the reasons for that?
There are a number of reasons. part of the problem, and I must be honest with you, that we have not marketed ourselves correctly. It's very easy to blame the other, but I think there's an inherent reason that we should market ourselves correctly. But also, most of these issues are geopolitical. They have to do with powers in parts of the world. Part of it has resulted in foreign policy, part of it has been destabilizing countries all over the world, and as a result we have created a massive refugee crisis and people moving from one part of the world to the other. So it's very complex, and what we tend to do with our mass media is we do not, or are not ready for the debate on this issue. What we tend to do is we want small buzzwords, small 1 or 2 sentences to try and explain something that is so complex. So there is a need for the debate to be had, and I feel that we are in the right position in the United Kingdom because we enjoy the liberal democracy that's in this country that allows us a voice to speak out, and also we are in an influential position. If you think of Britain at the moment, of course, unless Cameron thinks differently, we'll stay in Europe, so we'll influence European policy. We are head of the Commonwealth, so therefore what happens here also influences countries far wider than the United Kingdom. So I think we're in a privileged position and we can make those changes.
Well, are you suggesting that most of these are the outer forces who actually have pushed the Muslim community in this corner, or do you reckon there are some accountability and responsibility the Muslim community also has in terms of, if you look at the statistics in terms of education, if you look at the participation in the political system, if you look at the participation in civil liberty, in public life. And the reason I'm talking about 2 models, which is India and United Kingdom, because that's where most of our listeners and viewers would be interested. We are right at the bottom of that list when you examine the statistics in terms of the achievement, attainment and participation in the mainstream activities. Don't you think that those factors has also played some role in terms of the way how world perceives the Muslim community?
Most certainly. First of all, if we look at the issue of education, possibly the Indian community is not at the bottom of the league table.
I'm talking about Muslims.
Muslims. We have the difficulty where sometimes we are too inward looking as a community, so we need to challenge the status quo where we are as a community. But I think more importantly, we have not become part and parcel of the bigger debate. We still seem to, in some cases, and I don't mean to be terrible with anybody, but we seem to bring the village politics into the mainstream. We have moved on. We need to create a European identity for who we are and move forward. The country gives you the opportunity of education, and we are not taking that opportunity. So it's not a lack of policy from government. However, we must also understand that with an unfriendly media and negative perceptions of Muslims is making it even more difficult for Muslims to participate in wider society. It could be in relation to employment, etc. And also parents have a role in the career paths that children choose within the certain Asian Muslim community. If I give you an example, there is a tendency that if my son or daughter becomes a doctor, buys a Mercedes and lives in some leafy suburb in the city, they've actually arrived in life. And if they fail at that and they become either an accountant, an optician or something of that level, fair enough. If not, then they end up opening a kebab shop around the corner. Now, that disparity is too big. So I often write in the local press to ask people to consider their careers in different paths in this country. Okay. So not everybody can become doctors and lawyers. And others can also move into other fields. So example, those that can join the police service. In fact, my 2 sons and son-in-law are police officers within the Leicestershire Force, but they have a very strong identity as Muslims. So as an example, my eldest son, he did his Hifz al-Quran, he went to Bristol for his degree, he did his postgraduate degree in law and then joined the police service. My son-in-law, of course, works on the corporate side of the police and moved into the uniform branch. But there is factors that we have to take into consideration around a wide range of issues within probation, within teaching, within other fields. And I think what we need to do is give the children the encouragement to move forward and not to restrict them into one career path, which generally is, as I've said, be a doctor, be a dentist, be an optician, be an accountant, and that's about it. And I think we should give them the opportunity to move forward.
Okay, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching the program called In Conversation with. My name is Imtiaz Patel, Varediawala, and we are talking to a very distinguished and honorable guest, Mr. Suleman Nagdi from Leicester. My next question would be, you are also associated with Leicestershire Faith Forum. Now again, I mean, it may sound negative, but unfortunately we see in today's world the polarization of communities. What are the reasons and how do we actually attain harmony and interaction in this, what we see is turning a very chaotic world?
Right. If you look at the understanding of people who have about Islam or Muslims, I would think over 90% in most of the surveys evidence this, that people's understanding of the faith of Islam is generally through the media, and very few, possibly only about 2 or 3% is interaction with Muslims. So I think we have to work with members of other faith communities to realign their thinking and give an understanding. As an example, I have worked within the county of Leicestershire and further afield, including Europe. And in fact, I just did one 2 days ago where I do a round of talks in churches with about 40 or 50 people to have an open discussion about Islam and what Islam actually stands for. I chair at the moment the Leicestershire Faith Forum, which is made up of members of all different faith communities. And the idea is we have a forum whereby we can discuss some of the thorny and difficult issues, but also some of the positive contribution that Islam has made. Many people think of Islam in this country as being from the sort of 40s, 50s. They forget that for 300 years, certainly with the merchant navy in cities like Cardiff and Liverpool, Muslims have interacted. And if you go back to 8th century Britain, with the King of Mercia, you find gold coins with inscription of the Shahada on it. So we have crossroads, and also the contribution we have done in, if you look at places like Spain, Muslim Spain, for 800 years or more, we have ruled there. The whole European Renaissance has taken place. The age of learning, enlightenment was there. And I think what we have done, unfortunately, and this is where I need to be critical of our own community, I think over the last 200-300 years, we have lost the push that we had in relation to contributing to the various sciences. And that is a failure on our side. And the reason for that could possibly be a number. But certainly, I think in the early century, early part of last century, after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, possibly we haven't quite recovered from that, and we have become victims as a result of this. And I think the past glory of Islam should shine through, and we have the capacity, we have demonstrated it in the past, and I see no reason why we can't now. So our ulama, our learned scholars, etc., though they talk about the past glory of Islam, which you also address issues that are relevant to us today, including the vices that take place in our society, be it those that abuse drink, drugs, etc. And we need to be honest that these are some of the crimes that people are involved in. This issue about number of Muslims in prisons. Why are we having an open debate about that and what is happening? The issue about rehabilitation of prisoners and back into society, back spiritually as well as in employment, into housing, etc. So there's a wide range of issues that we need to do. But what we seem to do is shy away and sweep it under the carpet. And I think we need visionaries, and we are short of visionaries in our community where people can bypass this problem that we have there and connect. Also, there's a difficulty, I think, connection between the younger generation and the elders, and there's a push and pull factor there. We need to understand that an identity crisis has also crept in among some of our younger people, and I think the elders in society need to know that at some point they need to let go of the rein to the younger people who will be future leaders of our country, and therefore give them the opportunity to take things forward. But we have this tendency, to some degree is right, but some degree is wrong, that those that are grey and white hair seem to know it all, and the younger people know nothing. I think we need to change that shift of balance slightly and empower our young people to move forward.
That's a good point in terms of empower our young people and community members as well, including some of the gatekeepers as well, if I may call them.
That's right.
There are people who believe, and nowadays we see this again in media quite often, that some governments around the world are taking very repressive measures when it comes to democratic rights, when it comes to people raising their voices, etc. And in the process, they often violate what we call human rights. What should be done to attack this in terms of, protecting people's civil liberties?
Well, firstly, Islam has the answer for this. Islam often talks about what underpins a Muslim and a Muslim thinking. And what underpins what we do is social justice. As long as you can establish social justice for all, then it will eradicate some of this. Unfortunately, what's happened in some parts of the world, we have governments that are repressive. And sometimes people tell me that Islamic states, I don't know whether they are in Islamic states. I have my doubt about it. I would say that there are Muslims in the majority in some parts of the world, and therefore they rule it. Whether it's exactly an Islamic state is a question that the listeners have to ask. But if you look back 1400 years when the faith of Islam was actually codified, and if you look at example the Constitution of Medina and how the respect of other faith communities, minorities, the Christians and certainly the Jewish people was safeguarded and protected. And we have the wonderful example of Saladin Ayyubi, who marched in at the time of the Crusades in the 12th century into Jerusalem and gave safe passage to the knights to return back to Europe. Again, illustrates the compassion that Islam had in relation to people of other faith and other communities. And we seem to have lost that compassion because we feel that by working on interfaith or working with people of other faith communities, we are somehow diluting our faith. And we are not diluting. In fact, what we are showing is what we call in Islam dawah, is by our very practice, we are now demonstrating to the outside world that we have something more beautiful to share with you, and let's take from each other.
Nice one. We are coming to an end of the interview, but I cannot let this issue go in terms of which I have picked up when I was studying your biodata. That Suleman sir, we are especially interested in your family's link with Mahatma Gandhi ji, the father of nation of India, and the first Prime Minister Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru ji. Can you very briefly tell us about this very interesting link?
We've had two links. My family has two links, both with the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa and the fight for independence in India. My grandfather had actually spent time in prison in South Africa when Gandhi had actually come to South Africa at the time when the pass laws were enforced. And if people know the history, when he actually ripped up the pass and then he was in prison, so was my granddad, and they traveled together to India. And our village, which is called Kacholi, which is very near between Surat and Nosari, was a village where he had promised to come, but unfortunately he was assassinated. So Nehru had actually come, and some people call him Nehru's Gam, Nehru's village, because he came to honor the memory of my grandfather in relation to his fight for this independence for India. At the same time, in South Africa, my uncle was heavily involved with Nelson Mandela and had given protection to Nelson Mandela in various quarters to fight against a regime that was the apartheid and minority rule over the majority. So the family has been interlinked in relation to two parts of the world, which I think is part and parcel of the history, which I'm sure none of us can carry that lantern anymore. And it is those people in the past who seen the vision many, many years ago to talk, and again it underpins it. What underpinned it? Social justice is what I said before. Social justice must underpin everything we do, even if it means that we have to stand up in evidence against our very own if they do an act of criminality, because after all, justice is blind. It does not distinguish between your family member, non-family member, and we have to stand up for the rights of people.
Nice one. But having said that, I'm sure that you and your family must be very proud of this fact that your family members have made significant contribution in the process in Africa and in India as well, and having these very important links.
I would not use the word proud, possibly I would say privileged, because pride is something that our faith teaches us to stay away from, but actually privileged, and of course to thank the Almighty to give you an opportunity to be part of this history and to try and do something good in society, which after all can benefit people far wider than your immediate family.
Nice one, thank you. Suleman sir, would you have any message or messages for our listeners and viewers before we let you go?
Right, I think it is extremely important that we remain confident in who we are, confident in our identity. We are Muslims first and foremost. Does not necessarily mean that as Muslims we are, as I've said, diluting our faith in any way by interacting with society. Let us not be frightened, let us be confident, move forward and contribute to the country that has given you a place to live. This is my country as much as anybody else, and let us take our privileges in this country, but at the same time let us contribute to the thinking in this country and now think that this is home, and let us contribute to our own home.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Imtiaz Patel, Varediawala, and we were engaged in a very fruitful, constructive dialogue and debate with Janab Suleman Nagdi. And on behalf of Beaver's team, on behalf of our listeners and viewers, we would like to thank him that he has taken his valuable time out of his very, very busy schedules and shared some very useful and interesting, in fact, all of the information with us. So thank you very much, sir, for your speaking to you. Last but not least, you can send your feedback by visiting our website. We have our social media as well, so you can upload your comments and questions and feedback onto social media as well. You are listening to the program called In Conversation with Bebas Community Media Centre, Bolton, UK. Thank you for watching this program. Wherever you are, be happy, look after yourself, but at the same time, make other people happy and look after other people happy as well. Thank you.